fellow members, all our special guests today. John is the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Racing Board and has been since March 2015. Before that, as some of you will know, he was the Chief Executive and Secretary of Foreign Affairs and Trade since July 2009. And before that, where I first met him, when he was Chief Executive of New Zealand Post. He was there at an interesting time because he led a range of initiatives designed to drive growth, I guess, against declining mail volumes. While he was the Chief Executive at MFAC, he was also the advisor to the boards of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Education New Zealand, Asia New Zealand Foundation, and trustee of the New Zealand China Council. Currently, John is chair of the New Zealand Police Assurance and Risk Committee and B, Accessible Charitable Trust, and trustee of the Museum of New Zealand Te Papa Tongarewa Foundation. He's also a member of the Territorial Forces Employer Support Council. John, we're grateful that you've made some time to speak to us today. So, fellow members and guests, please warmly welcome John in our customary manner.
Kia ora tātou. I was very struck by Suzanne Snively's observation that I was amongst people who were leaders and thinkers. And I just want to make the observation that this is an endangered species in the world today. When you see a world in which Nigel Farage is the face of 21st century Britain, or you see a world in which Donald Trump is potentially the face of 21st century US, or you see President-elect Duterte in the Philippines, a man who believes genuinely that people who criticise his government should be shot, or you see in Austria people voting for a far-right presidential candidate, you really do have to start asking the question, what has happened to reason, what has happened to facts, what has happened to science in the national debate? And when I hear that I'm amongst people who are humanists, people who understand, I'm just going to try and get out of the sort of slight shaking in the back of my head, which I think might just be a personal thing, but nonetheless.
They're sorting it out.
They're sorting it out, I don't doubt. But when I know that I'm in that sort of company, what I want to say to you is that what you are doing and what this organisation is doing here in this city, in this country and around the world is becoming more and more critical to our future. If you don't think that, if you think I'm overstating it or in some way misrepresenting it, then I just ask you to go and read a speech that was given a week or two ago in London by a chap called Jonathan Sacks. Lord Sacks was the chief rabbi in the United Kingdom for many, many years and has written very extensively on society and how society engages, particularly in a time of conflict between religions. And what he has said is, what he says in that speech, and when you read it you will see, is that we are standing at a particularly critical time on our planet and in our world. Everywhere you look, he said, whether you're looking diplomatically, you're looking religiously, you're looking economically, you see challenge, mistrust and disquiet. He said it is not saying too much. Remember, this is a man who's standing in that great Judaic tradition looking back thousands of years. A man who's deeply informed about contemporary society, and he is saying it is not saying too much that the West and our notion of freedom which we've developed over the last 400 years is altogether at risk. Altogether at risk. And so what I'm saying to you is that for Kerry to ask me to stand here today and talk to you about the future of betting is, in my view, with all respect to the importance of that institution, to the importance of that institution for the racing industry of Aotearoa New Zealand, to misunderstand the challenge that we collectively confront. You know, it's interesting, President Obama spoke at a commencement address at Rutgers not that long ago. It was the sort of commencement address season in the US, and he made the most extraordinary comment. Here he was with the commencement class of 2016. And he said, I want to say to you, and say to you clearly, class of 2016, ignorance, whether in public life or in private life, is not a virtue. Ignorance is not a virtue. It is truly extraordinary to me that in the environment that we are living at the moment, ignorance can be considered a virtue. People can misrepresent facts. People can misrepresent futures. People can and do misrepresent history. And the consequence of that is not that they are held to account by a disbelieving, sceptical, thinking, leading environment, but that they are endorsed, that they receive accolades, and that they are seen in some way as being populist leaders. Now, it would be very easy, of course, to say, well, this is all happening elsewhere. New Zealand, of course, being buffered by oceans. You know, David Longy once famously described us as shaped like a dagger, strategically positioned, thrusting at the heart of Antarctica. By which I think he meant we were largely irrelevant. And of course, he's not wrong, but he is. But we are mistaken if we think that countries building walls around themselves, whether it's Britain or it's the US, is good for this part of the world. If we believe that insecurity in the South China Sea or in Europe is good for this part of the world. If we believe that the displacement of miles and masses of people across Europe and into Europe from the Middle East is good for the world. Because we know that this is a country that depends on immigration. We depend on free flows of capital. We've depended on generations of new thinking and new blood as, you know, wave after wave of immigrants have come to our country and they have benefited our country. So I just want to start with this proposition that Rotary matters, that the values that you espouse, that Suzanne put up on that wall, matter, that the education that Francis was talking about matters, and the advocacy of our young people and youth and their engagement in the universities of this country really matter. And Nigel spoke, I thought, a little disrespectfully about the Waikato, but if I can simply say that I was the person who restarted the trend, because I'm a Hamilton boy. Because well, you can tell immediately, it's that sort of sophisticated edge that we have when we're from the Tron. But I started, I think, the movement, because I left Hamilton and came to Victoria, and I've never looked back. I was lucky enough to have Professor Prebble as my tax lecturer, which I never understood a word, but nonetheless, I want to congratulate him on his elevation to the inner bar, because it's a wonderful thing. And I know, I'm sure it's been celebrated widely here in the club, as it has been around the country. But the point that I want to make now is that if we are going to take things forward, if we are going to act to move forward in this environment, then community and partnership becomes incredibly important. Put simply, we can't, in the face of this sort of challenge, stand alone. And the reality is, whether it's a business challenge or whether it's an international challenge of climate change or transparency, as Suzanne was describing, or indeed simply delivering the amount of food that the world is going to need to be able to survive, or addressing some of these challenges of inequality around our planet that are driving such major shifts in public opinion and public experience. If we are going to address that, it does require all of us to engage our minds. It does require all of us to be not only intellectually inspired, but also to be lifted together to be able to achieve those goals, to address those issues. And the reality is, whether for a business or for a society, partnership requires certain key ingredients. It requires respect. It requires listening. It requires collaboration. And all of those ingredients you don't see in so much of the current rhetoric. Now, because if I don't mention betting, Kerry is going to strike me off her Christmas card list for all time, let me just say this, that every business in New Zealand, every organisation in this country is confronted by existential challenges, and betting is in no way different. The existential challenge that is posed by new technologies and evolving technologies, and Francis again spoke about this a little earlier, the speed of change in the technological environment and what that is doing to traditional business models and the ability of organisations to adapt quickly enough. And when you ran off that little list of organisations that I've been lucky enough to be involved with, New Zealand Post, racing, or even diplomacy, people might have sat there and said, well, what's the single organising idea across all three of those? Well, it may well have been that all of them were fundamentally challenged by technology. You know, the diplomacy is challenged by technology because you don't simply need people around the world anymore just to absorb and to report back to Wellington. You can get that on CNN. You need judgment, you need insight, you need people who can advocate and build constituencies, a different skill set. New Zealand Post Group, fundamentally challenged, of course, by the reality that customers have stopped writing letters. This is a great tragedy, I might say, not only in terms of the economics of that particular organisation, which is a wonderful organisation as is MFAT, but also because of the lack of history, common history, that is now available and is recorded and shared in and across society. It's a real challenge, I suspect, for historians and biographers as we move forward. And then in betting, because just Kerry's getting worried that I'm not going to mention betting, in betting, we have exactly the same challenge. So traditional models, the TAB, the centre of the community, well, some communities, the centre of some communities, is no longer operating in quite that same way. Most people are betting online. There are very, very big international amalgamations of betting businesses. Organisations are spending billions and billions of dollars on technology to drive innovation and customer acquisition. The New Zealand TAB, the New Zealand Racing Board, simply does not have the balance sheet, the bandwidth to be able to drive and compete in that way. So what do we do? In the same way that New Zealand Post did, in the same way that our diplomats do around the world, what do? We partner. We partner. We can't do it all ourselves, so we partner. And so we're building partnerships now with large organisations around the world to ensure that we have a competitive offering. And why does it matter? Why does it matter? I heard that. Why does it matter? I thought that was Kerry's 5-minute bell. It matters simply because in New Zealand, every dollar of profit that we make in the betting business goes back to the racing or sports communities. And why does that matter? Because New Zealand has an internationally competitive horse breeding, horse training, horse racing industry. It employs thousands of Kiwis, and they are genuinely of international standard. It makes 1.6 billion, in fact I think it's probably more than that now, but the last figures that I've reliably got, 1.6 billion in contribution to the economy of our country. It is very, very vital to the economies of regional New Zealand and to small communities around our country. And so for me, the reason why it matters, the future of the TAB, the future of the Racing Board, is because the lifeblood of those communities depend on us delivering that ongoing profitability. Now, just to give you a few figures, yeah, and then I'm 2 seconds. I'd hate you to think it was a fact-free presentation, having said that things without facts are not to be. So here's the facts. Fact 1, $2.5 billion. So at least that amount of money this year. So our year ends in July. We do it at that's the same as the horse birthday. 1st of August is the beginning of our new year. It's the same when the horses all change age. God knows why they do that, but nonetheless, it's so deeply perplexing. But we will see $2.5 billion bet by New Zealanders and some Australians and 1 or 2 offshore persons plus gaming. We have betting and gaming. So it'll be about 2.2 billion, about 300 million on gaming. So that gives you an idea of the scale. Now, most of that money goes back to successful punters, because the punters think that they can outwit the TAB, and often they do outwit the TAB. Most betting now, it's not the tote. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you remember those old days when it was all on the tote and it was just absolutely reliable. It was like sort of, I was going to say like pulling pokies, but no, I won't say that. It was absolutely reliable. But now most is on fixed odds betting. So there's big changes going on. The growth areas of sports betting, and particularly in-play sports betting. And that's growing, in play has grown about 90% year on year. So there's big changes in what we are doing. Okay, so that's enough about betting, it's enough facts. But the single proposition that you need to take from this is, 1, that communities matter. 2, that the New Zealand Racing Board supports the communities of this country. 3, that we need more thinkers, more leaders, more humanists to take our country forward. And 4, that, God damn it, we have to stand and we have to challenge some of this extraordinary populist response that we are seeing around the world, because it is damaging our futures and those of our children. So no, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, John. I too have a beef with Kerry, because that's a very difficult speech for me to summarise. So I think I'm just going to say, wow. My pulse is racing, pardon the pun. And the best postscript I can leave you guys with is really for all of us to reflect on what John said. So can we show again our appreciation for John's attendance today?
Clearly the first 2 words of what I was thinking you were going to speak about was right, and that's the future. But what I'll change it to be is the future where ignorance cannot allow to be a virtue. So that'll be the official title. And thank you very much. And you, if I could just say that the most important relationship and membership that John has is he's a board member of the New Zealand Festival, and it's been a long time, so you need to add that to his list. It's obviously not on his website. What I'd like to do now is invite Robert Armstrong up, please. So Robert is, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to tell you about Robert. Robert's transferring from Tawa Rotary, where he's been a Rotarian for 40 years, to be part of this club. And so we're very lucky, and I know it's not been an easy decision for Robert to make, but Robert's moved into the city and it makes more sense for him to be here. And I'll put a picture up that I took of Robert yesterday at a district changeover so you can see what he's been doing in his own community. I'm just going to say 5 things about Robert. First of all, he started life as a lawyer with Chapman Tripp and rose through the ranks to a partnership, and retired probably more than a decade ago, and then was a huge supporter as a city councillor representing the Northern Ward in my term as mayor. In fact, he was probably the most significant councillor that supported me leading the strategic planning committee during his time there. So a wonderful sport and a great representative from the community. Robert's married to Carol, and they have 4 daughters who all are married, and he has lots of grandchildren. He doesn't get a right to reply, so he can do that when he does his introduction. He still plays cricket for the Masters, and he travels the world, which is really travelling the world, but he pretends to play cricket on his way around. And in some difficult and impossible to explain way, Robert's children, my children, share similar DNA. And that Robert and my first husband are first cousins, so our children do have 42nd twice removed DNA. So we welcome you warmly into the Rotary Club of Wellington, and I know that you will continue to give as much as you've given in Tawa, and we hope to get the fellowship here that you've had for such a long time in Tawa. Congratulations, and I promise them a hug. Right, now if there are people who would like they could come up as I give a couple of notices, please. So first of all, tree planting happened on Saturday. Ian Prisk organised. There were about 40 volunteers. We planted a heap of trees, and then of course it rained on Saturday night, so we had the weather on our side in terms of making sure they get the best of start. The next tree planting is this Saturday, so please look at the website, and if you're available, we've got that 100,000 vision of trees to plant. We're going to get there if we get 40 volunteers every time. Secondly, district changeover happened yesterday in Tawa. The conference next year is going to be in Taranaki. I've given the appropriate bits of paper to the President-elect and Peter Lawson for the following year, because they will be representing us along with others at the conference. And Susan, would you like to make some notice?
On this coming Saturday, I'd very much appreciate any baking or contribution to the morning tea. Thank you. And thank you, Helen.
Dennis?
I'm delighted to ask our President, Kerry, her last official duty, to present the Frank Jones Cup to our new victor, Jeff Bascard. If you could come up, Jeff, thank you. Jeff is to this club's golf, as Lydia Coe is to golfing in the world. So there you go. There you go.
And what's particularly pleasing is Frank Jones was my great uncle, so there you go. I'm a quarter Welsh with that very well known Welsh surname Jones, so congratulations. I'm to remind you all to fill in the wine options bit of yellow paper on your desk, so Stuart's very keen that you fill in that. And now Mark wants to say a few words.
Thanks, President Kerry. Fellow guests, today marks the changeover of the President and a number of board members rotate off, and I just really wanted to take on your behalf the opportunity to acknowledge a number of people. First one is I'll ask John Fletcher to stand, who's rotating off international. John is the quiet achiever in the international committee. We make a huge difference across the Pacific and across the globe. And John, as he rotates off, has enhanced our club's reputation, our zone reputation, our national reputation with the Samoan Garden Project, the Philippines Water Project, Emergency Response Kit, just to name three. And John's position is really well for the future, which is Rotary, as we finish End Polio Now campaign, Rotary International are likely to move to fresh water for everybody on the planet. So we're really well positioned for that. So John, on behalf of the club, thank you for your chairmanship of the International Committee. It's been outstanding. Yusuf, I could ask you to, Yusuf also stepping down or rotating off as the chair of the Strategy Committee, and whilst he remain chair of the remain on the Strategy Committee and the Membership Committee, he's really going to take a leading role with jumbo tennis. In his time as our thought leader, and I think the discussion today has been that, Yusuf has challenged the club and a number of the premise to make sure we are positioned for the future. You've done an outstanding job of making sure we are relevant, whether that's youth, protocol, committees, and all the things we've done. You've made an outstanding contribution to where we are positioned. So I want to thank you for your amazing energy, and it's been really appreciated by us all. So thanks, Yusuf. And it's to thank Kerry and Rex as Kerry's year. Kerry's been counting down since Christmas with me, just reminding me of the number of meetings to go from it. So Kerry finishes today as president, but as you all know, it's a 3-year tenure of things to do as president. So this is the end of year 2. The formal part got 1 more year as a trustee on the John Eilert Trust. And just to remind Kerry, you're coming back in 2020 as the deputy president for whoever is actually the president in that year. So just leave it in your calendar. I've learnt a lot off Kerry, and I've even recruited a new EA to learn off Mary. to make sure that I can manage the competing roles of this. So I've seen how truly organised and ruthless Kerry is in management and time and getting motions through. We've been extremely privileged to have Kerry lead us. She's been the epitome of service before self. She sets standards that I have no hope in hell of matching, which is, how do you get an AGM through in about 48 seconds? So I'm not sure how I'll match that. Kerry has an amazing network she's used to all of our advantage. She's passionate about all of our club activities, being passionate about our fundraising, and where it comes to the arts and the community, it's been amazing. And just what we were hearing before, and then with singers to listen for, those links and those networks are just extraordinary. Kerry's politically astute, other than wearing weird to Premier House the other night. And I'm really grateful for her legacy for our club, which is we've got financial certainty. We've got now some spreadsheets and some understanding about where we all sit. The club chairs all know how much money they can now contribute to the national good. We've got a 5th Monday in place, which is working really well to be able to bring partners and youth and a whole range of other things in and spend more time in social networking. We're spending more fellowship time, even though you broke your own rule today on your last meeting. The fellowship time's been extraordinary. And our partnership with Vic has flourished under Kerry's time as well. So Kerry, on behalf of all of us in service, thank you for your passion, dedication and commitment. And on behalf of all of us,
thank you. Wow.
Well, thank you very much. I guess next week I get a right reply as I hand over the chains to Mark, so I'll make sure I use it wisely. And I did break my rule today about fellowship time, but I've learned from you to be disruptive is good and keeping you on your toes, so that's why we didn't have any fellowship time today. So just before I thank all of our guests today, to our amazing guest speaker, John, thank you for coming along. Could I just say to you all, I look forward to seeing you all next Monday, and as I've become accustomed to, or you will become accustomed to, I looked through what happened this day in history to see if there's anything relevant to what our speaker was going to talk about. There was nothing about beating, you'll be pleased to know. So that was fine, there was nothing about beating, but there were some things that I think are a little bit relevant to what's happened in the news over the last week. So first of all, this day in history, in 1967, not much happened before 1967, the world's first cash dispenser was installed at Barclays Bank in Enfield in England. And it was invented as a voucher system. The maximum withdrawal was $28. So just imagine nowadays you can put in $100, you get about £500 out if you do it today. But anyway, that's the first one. That's not that long ago. In 1969, again something that happened in the last 2 weeks. The patrons at Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City's Greenwich Village, clashed with police. This incident is considered to be the birth of the homosexual rights movement, and we've seen that played out in Orlando in the last 2 weeks. And finally, picking up the theme of intelligence, which was clearly behind your thoughtful address this afternoon. In 1826, James Smithson, who was the founder of the Smithsonian Museums in the States, died in this day in 1826. He was the son, illegitimate son of Hugh Smithson, the first Duke of Northumberland, and he inherited a lot of money off his mother, and he left that to the museums. And of course, if you go to Washington, absolutely phenomenal. You can spend 3 months there and still not get a chance to see everything there is to see. So thank you all very much. Thank you for the flowers. Thank you all very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all next Monday. So officially it's the last one, but next Monday I'll just get as I hand over the chance to say a few words summarising my year. Thank you very much.